What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Faith in 15 or Less with me, Jasmine Marie. This is your biblically based midweek faith boost. All right, a few quick announcements. As you can see behind me, the intention planners are still up and available for purchase. Just go to jazzthepoet.com/works to get yours, available in men and women editions. Secondly, one down, one to go. Plan with Jazz is happening again this Sunday. Just about everybody knows how to set goals, but not everyone has the strategy to put in place to make sure that you execute with maximum effectiveness. I do, and I'm giving it to you. Come plan with us in a virtual group planning session. Go to jazzthepoet.com/events-1. Hope to see you there. And it's free for everyone who purchases a planner. All right, announcements aside, let's dive in. So, first and foremost, if you did not see last week's episode, stop watching, go back, watch episode 27 so you can get caught up. Now, for everyone else, we are doing a month-long study of Esther. And this week we're picking up with Esther 5-7 because we're looking at chapters. I do not have the time on this video to read all the chapters to you. So your homework is to go and read chapters 5-7 for yourself, to do the work and to sit with the revelation that I'm sharing with you today. There are a couple things that I want to highlight, and we're going to start with chapter 5. So in chapter 5, we see Esther. Esther is fresh off of her 3-day fast. And today's topic is about the power of fasting. So fresh off of her 3-day fast, she goes before the king, which is a risk because she was not called. And so if the king does not reach out his golden scepter, then she could be put to death. But she finds favor with the king when she goes. He reaches out his golden scepter and he asks what she wants. And so she invites the king and Haman to her banquet. And so they come, right? And then we'll transition to Haman. So she lets them know that she just wants a banquet for the king and Haman. Haman is so overjoyed. He's been invited by the queen to a private banquet with just her and the king. But then after he leaves the banquet, he sees, once again, Mordecai unwilling to bow down to him. So he immediately gets filled with frustration and pride about Mordecai's actions. And he devises a plan. When he goes home, he tells his family and friends like what's happening, how he's been called, and that this guy Mordecai is still not listening. So he devises a plan to take Mordecai out. They suggest that he builds gallows, I believe like 50 cubits high, so that Mordecai can be impaled on them in front of everyone. And he's going to ask the very next day for the king to give him permission to kill Mordecai. That night, after the first banquet, the king cannot sleep. And while he's unable to sleep, he calls in his advisors and he's like, bring me the book of things that happened so he can read over things that have happened. And he remembers that Mordecai was responsible for saving him from a plot on the king. So he says, what's been done for Mordecai? And they say nothing. So first thing in the morning, he's like, who's in the court? I want to talk to somebody. Haman is in the court because Haman is coming to ask the king to take Mordecai's life. But the king asks Haman, like, what should I do for a man that deserves honor above all other men for his loyalty to the king? Haman thinks it's about himself. So he shares this elaborate plan. This man should be given a robe of the king, should be paraded around the city by the king's highest official. And the king is like, great, that's exactly what I want you to do for Mordecai. Parade him around, do everything that you said, leave nothing out. And Haman is devastated. He goes home, he tells his family, and they're like, actually, I want to read what they said. And this is chapter 6, verse 13. When Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that had happened to him, his wise men and his wife Zeresh said to him, if Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish descent, you will not prevail against him, but will surely fall before him. Oh boy. And so in chapter 7, They go back to the banquet with the king and Esther and Haman together, and Esther requests that her people and her life be spared. And the king's like, yeah, why would it not be spared? And she points out Haman and that he's the reason that her people have been sentenced to annihilation. And the king gets filled with wrath and sentenced Haman to be killed, and to be killed on top of the gallows that he built for Mordecai. Whew. So there's a couple things I want to highlight about the power of fasting that we see in chapters 5 through 7. The first thing is that fasting gives you strategy. Fasting is us partnering with God. We're denying our flesh to give room to fill and feed our spirit. And in that exchange, we're inviting God in, right? And so we get supernatural strategy during that time because we're submitting our bodies, our thoughts, our lives, our supplication to God. And so what we see with Esther is she fasted for 3 days, and then she has the strategy to go before the king. She has the strategy to not just ask her request the first time, but to have 2 banquets, right? And so she just was very wise and strategic about how she approached this very delicate matter with the king, right? She went before him. She invited him to this thing. She could have just told him there, but she decided to do a banquet. All of that was just supernatural strategy. It was build up, and it gave time for God to do his thing. The second thing that we see from the power of fasting is that fasting supplements your preparation. It supplements your preparation. I think this is huge because we need to be mindful that even though we tap into our spiritual abilities, there are still actions for us to take physically with our own bodies. We don't just get to fast and pray and watch God do everything. There were things that Esther had to do. She had to have the banquets prepared. So when she went to invite the king, there was something for them to come to, right? So there was preparation that took place in addition to her prayer. And it's important for us to know that we work in 2 realms. We work in the spiritual realm and on the physical realm, but we do so only after we partner with God and receive his strategy. The third thing that we see from the power of fasting, and this may be the biggest thing, is that it invites God to work on your behalf. One thing that I've been noting is that God is not mentioned in all of Esther, in the whole book, in all 10 chapters, but we see God move in so many ways here in these chapters. First, there's a hedge of protection around both Esther and Mordecai. At no part are they harmed, right? We see the weapons form. Every time something good happens for Esther, Haman devises an even bigger plan for Mordecai and the people. Esther has a banquet. Haman plans gallows to be built to kill Mordecai, right? So weapons are forming, but the word says that weapons formed against you will not prosper. And so because God is in the work, there's the hedge of protection that no matter what is happening, and Esther doesn't even know what's happening behind the scenes, but God, his angels, himself, he is protecting his people. And that's one of the things that comes when we invite him to work on our behalf. Another thing that we see is that you receive favor before God when you submit and surrender your plans to him, right? Esther is given favor when she goes before the king. He doesn't kill her. He reaches out his scepter. He asks, what is it that you want? What is it? Ask for anything up to half of the kingdom, right? She received favor. And Mordecai also received favor. The king couldn't sleep. Who else is it but God, but keeping the king disturbed to the point where he wants to read about what happened so that he can remember to honor Mordecai. That's God working on our behalf behind the scenes in ways we don't even know. And that's the thing. When we partner with God, we have to trust that there are things that we can't see, things that we don't know about that we're being saved from, things that we don't know about that we're going to be invited into. And that's because God is working on our behalf. And that's why it's important for us to partner with him. The third thing is God fought her battle. All Esther had to do was prepare the banquet, to execute the strategy. And God gave the king the discernment and the direction for what to do about Haman. right? She didn't suggest that he be killed on the gallows that she didn't know about. While the king was mad, his eunuchs looked out the window and said, look, those are the gallows he planted for Mordecai. And the king said, let him be killed on those. That's God fighting the battle. Sometimes God fights the battle through you, like we see with David and Goliath. And sometimes he fights the battle for you when he has other people moving on your behalf. And so I did a fast at the end of the year, which was rooted in the study of Esther. And if you find that you are looking for clarity, for direction, for strategy, for the road ahead, I strongly suggest that you consider adding fasting to your prayers. And you can use Esther's guide, just a 3-day fast, right? The one that I offered was only for 12 hours a day. But there's so much power that comes when we intentionally partner with God and deny ourselves. And that's all I have for you today. I'm going to share my 3 declarations and I'm going to get out your way. All right, 3 declarations. Repeat after me. 1, I will partner with God to receive his supernatural strategy. Number 2, I will diligently prepare for what I'm expecting from the Lord. There's something I just have to say about preparation because I think it's so important to realize. This whole series, this YouTube series, is about faith moments. And if you are believing God for something, then you have to prepare for what you believe. Esther believed that God was going to grant her favor when she went before the king. And because she believed that, the banquet was already prepared for the king to come to. And so what is it that you're believing God for? If it's increased business, do you have the systems in place to carry out the call? If it's a new promotion, do you have the systems in place in your life to carry out the new responsibility? Preparation is a faith move. All right. And the final declaration. Number 3. I invite God in to work on my behalf. And that takes surrender and submission. All right, that's all I have for you today. There's just so much here. So please go back and read Esther 5-7 and sit with the Lord to see what he's calling you to do in this season. See you next week for episode 29.